I'm at Jacksonville University today. I'm going to test the amount of nitrogen in our St. Johns River today. We've recently received a report of algae blooms down in the San Mateo area near Palaca. So I want to see how many nitrates are in our water and if there's a potential for algae blooms here. So what is nitrogen and why do we care? So nitrogen is a nutrient that plants love. So in our river, we have a lot of aquatic grasses that grow. It provides food for herbivores, habitat for a lot of underwater creatures, and plants love the nutrients. But plants aren't the only thing that grow in our river. Algae also loves it. The form of nitrogen we will be testing today is nitrates, as this is the form that plants use. The nitrogen cycle is complicated, but the best way to remember the form that plants love is that nitrate ends in 8, so just remember that plants ate it. The unit of measurement we're going to be using is parts per million, ppm. It doesn't take much nitrogen to fuel plant growth. Nutrient cycling in nature is what supports a healthy ecosystem and occurs naturally through the decomposition of organic matter and fixing it from the atmosphere by bacteria, legumes, and certain species of algae. But an excess amount can undermine the ecological integrity of our waterways. So let's test the nitrate levels in our St. Johns River today, April 21st, 2020. First thing I'm going to do is put on gloves, because that is good scientific practice when working with chemicals. I have my sample of river water that I took earlier, and I'm going to take 5 milliliters of that sample and put it in this little jar. I have 2 test solutions. So I have bottle number 1. I'm going to add 10 drops into my 5 milliliter water volume. I'm going to put the cap back on, and then I'm going to invert a few times just to make sure it's mixed. Now the test that I'm using is an API saltwater test kit. I'm using salt water. We are in brackish water, so that means that there is salt in it. So I didn't want to use a freshwater sample. And API is a good water quality testing kit for a lot of aquariums. So you can find it at a lot of pet stores. All right, so now that I've inverted it a few times, I'm going to add my test bottle number 2, 10 drops of that. I'm just going to give the bottle a good shake, make sure it's evenly mixed. And then I'm going to add 10 drops of that. And then I'm going to shake this vigorously for 1 minute. All right, so we've shaken our sample vigorously for 1 minute, and so now we're going to let the color form. This takes about 5 minutes, and then we're going to compare the color to our color chart. So we waited our 5 minutes for the color to form, and I just wanted to show you all the color chart we're going to be using. There are other forms of nitrogen on this color chart, but we're just using nitrates on the side over here, and it goes from 0 ppm to 160. We're just going to hold up our little sample here next to the color chart. And it's not quite at 5 ppm. It's actually closer to 0, but not at 0. So I'm going to say it's around 1 ppm. It does not take a lot of nitrates for plants to grow. So 1 ppm is probably enough. But again, nitrates can enter into our water naturally or through excess nutrient intake. Why does this matter? Eutrophication is when the body of water becomes overly enriched in nutrients such as nitrogen. This excess amount of nutrients drives algae blooms that eventually deplete oxygen levels in the water and can cause fish kills. The excess amount of nutrients comes from fertilizers that people use on their farms or on their yards, especially around springtime. It can also leach into the water through the ground by human waste or animal waste. Algae blooms are visible signs of too much nutrients in our waterways. So let's wrap this up and answer the question of why we care about the level of nitrates in our St. Johns River. Recall that nitrates is a nutrient that plants need in order to grow. Excess nutrients from things like fertilizer can enter into our waterways and cause algae blooms, which cause eutrophication. This can lead to fish kills and dead zones. So algae, this is a very concentrated version of algae, but just to give you guys a visual. So algae is this greenish Willy Wonka color. So anytime you see this in the river, don't go in the water, report it. You can go to our website, stjohnsriverkeeper.org, and report it to the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Some of the things that St. John's Riverkeeper is doing to keep these algae blooms from happening in the river are holding polluters accountable, encouraging residents to use fertilizer wisely and plant Florida-friendly landscaping, removing unused and failing septic tanks from yards, and encouraging sewage treatment plants to upgrade so we don't have any leakage into our river. Thanks for joining us today in measuring the levels of nitrates in our St. Johns River. I hope you learned something, and we'll see you on the river again soon.